So I'm working on the kick panels now, finishing those out and making a transition piece out here to the outside so that the door will fall in against it right here. I've maintained the inner panel, the plastic inner panel, because this is an area that takes a lot of punishment when you're dragging your feet out of the car. You always kick this, so this plastic is pretty durable and it's easily cleaned up. So felt that was the better choice to have over here by your feet. So maintain that panel and then just fill in on the outside to make the transition. Of course, the aluminum threshold is going to come up in and over here for the old Dodge Charger, and then over here there's a cap that comes over the top that will capture the top of the aluminum threshold that makes the transition into covering the carpet. Anyway, on to the next thing. Here's another side benefit to maintaining this profile of this inner panel. You remember that I used the Dodge Challenger door panels and I modified them with all this stuff. You can see where this is all cut out to allow for the dash to fit in and around here, and you can see there's a pretty big gap from here to the front of the door on the bottom side here in the front, which is really not that noticeable when the door is closed. But if you close the door now, that panel pretty much completes that profile. So from the interior, once the door is shut, it has a much better looking appearance than having a large scallop here that would imitate the Dodge Charger door profile. Anyway, that's just a side benefit. I just discovered that now. Alright, well, I'm body working those kick panels. I'm starting to work on these A-pillar covers, the inside A-pillar covers. And what I did was I made a paper pattern to fit. I split the pattern so that I could work it up to the ceiling or the headliner area up here, and then down to the dash top, and try to get my angles and everything. And then once I got them fit up where I kind of like them, I pushed them tight up against each other and then taped them together to create one pattern. Something I did with my car, with the Daytona, that worked out fine, but there was a different situation going on with the windshield. The windshield, the A-post was much wider because I had modified the windshield bed, and there was a lot going on there. It's a little different on this car here. It's got a narrow A-post, so I'm not 100% sure this is going to work, but because I've got to heat this and bend this a bit more than I had to do with my car. With my car, I just had to cut it out and it fit right on. But anyway, this is the B-pillar, the lower B-pillar cover for a four-door Dodge Charger 06 through 11, or a Chrysler 300, same year, and I believe the Dodge Magnum would have this lower piece. Now you can see one side has got a lot of shape to it, but this other side is pretty straight, and it goes around, has a little bit of a hook in over here. This side here would go up against the windshield, and this side here with a little bit of taper here, I'm going to try and fit that up to the roof, and you just end up having just enough length to do it. At least this side is. I'll hopefully have enough for the other side also. You can see I've got the little bit of curve going in here. This is where it blends into the roof. Anyway, I'm going to cut this out and see if I can take all this and bend this around. This has to be bent around almost 100%. It won't cold bend. I tried to cold bend this plastic, and it basically snaps. So I did heat up a piece and bend it. We'll see how it works out for the actual piece. Alright, so this is the piece cut out, and I've already I put it in my sheet metal brake, adjusted the jaw up so it would take that almost 1/8 of an inch thickness, and then I clamped it in the jaw and slowly ran a heat gun across there, a little at a time, not staying in one spot too long, get it warm enough, and then just slowly, gradually give it a little pressure until she started to go over. I had to bend it in a couple of locations to kind of get it to curl under like that, I would prefer it to be a little bit further, but right now the top is hitting the brakes, so I don't have enough room to move it that far. Anyway, that's the piece. As you can see, these little ribs in here, I had to grind those out so that I could bend this face. This bend is already in it right here. This one in here is also there, so I just had to take from here over. There was another bend here, and then just start working it over, kind of rounded it so it would come to the outside. It's a little difficult to show you how this is all going to fit. But right now I have to drill a couple of holes, so it has 2 attachment points to the A-post. So I'll drill those out and I'll tap them in the A-post, and then once I have it in position, I'll show you the whole mess. Alright, so I gave up trying to bend that piece back as far as I needed it to bend back, because it just wouldn't go as far as I needed it to go. So I cut the end off, and then I finally figured out what sticks pretty good to this plastic, and that's hot melt glue. And the reason is because it actually melts its way into the plastic in addition to it being a glue. So I put a little return lip on here, which I'll show you that when I take this back off, but I've had it on and off about 50 times right now, trying to clearance for what the difference was with my cars. I have a single piece of glass without this vent window. You see how bulky this is? Well, if this is just a piece of 1/4 inch glass right down here, there's all this room here between the A-post, and so this portion here on my car just lays over onto this rubber seal. Now, and then the glass comes in somewhere around here. Well, this piece here, this rim and all this good stuff, that was smashing into my A-post cover that I'd made here, and so I had to get it way out of the way. That meant I had to tuck it up between this. You see this metal track here that holds this this rubber gasket here? Well, on the inside of it, and between a flange that's on the A-post itself, this is just slipped up in there now, this little return flange out of this black plastic. Anyway, long explanation for just a couple hours of back and forth. Anyway, get in here and show you what it looks like. And I got to do a little trimming here, and these are only temporary screws. I'm going to get oval heads, but you see it's just going into the dashboard here, right at the corner, nicely around here and on up, and it's plastic. And the main reason why I insist on doing this with plastic is, you know, old cars like 50s cars and 60s cars had metal A-post covers. Well, they're pretty dangerous. So, you know, I didn't even want to put a metal rim on here to, you know, accomplish what I had to do here, because if should this break loose, I mean, that's a big piece of metal coming straight at your freaking head. So anyway, there it is. I gotta do the other side. So anyway, that worked. All right, before I paint this out black, I wanted to show you, well, it's still obvious what I did as far as adding this rim here. You could see it's just a piece of 16th inch plastic bent over, and then glued in with this hot melt glue. It seemed to work pretty good. First thing that I've ever used on this plastic that didn't give up instantaneously. But anyway, that adds a little return lip that tucks underneath the channel that holds the door seal. So that helped me achieve what I needed to achieve. I tried bending this, heating this and bending this back. As you can see, that didn't work because it was just too much material, and just I couldn't apply enough heat to it apparently. So anyway, that's my solution to that problem, excuse me. And now I'm going to clean it up, and I'm going to paint it out black. Okay, so this is what the closeout looks like finished out for the kick panel, and that's about that. Nothing more to say about that. You want to see the other one over here. That's what that situation looks like. Anyway, that's that. On to the next thing. Okay, so here's the finished A post. Just got done painting it. Important to note when you're painting something like this is that use this sand-free adhesion promoter. This goes on liberally. Once it's coated with this, while it's still wet, then you come back in with this is used for vinyl. This is great stuff. Really spruces up an interior that's got a few fade marks here and there, but I've used this on vinyl and I've used it a little bit on leather. It works pretty good. But I use it on this plastic. It's not as great on the plastic because nothing really sticks to this plastic that well. But unless it's really in a place where it's going to get beat up really badly, and the A post is generally not that kind of an area, you got to be careful because you can scratch it off. But with the addition of this, it hangs on there pretty good. But anyway, that's that. Okay, so again with temporary screws, that's the A-pillar cover in place. Probably not fitting exactly how it's going to fit. This rubber molding's a little bit loose because the windshield's obviously not in place, but that's pretty much what we ended up with. Anyway, just thought I'd show you that. Alright, with the second A-post cover completed and in place over there, I'm officially done with the fabrication part of the interior parts. So now I'm going to move on to the gas filler. What I have to do first is create a plate to hold this neck up to that the underside of this hole over here. Now what I want to do is I don't want this to be proud of this surface here. I want this to be slightly recessed over here in order for this all to fit together and to be able to use this cap. Now the cap, I've gone ahead and it's this part of the cap anyway has been gutted. I've taken out the spring and the rubber gasket that normally goes on the 68 Charger, and the reason for that is it gives me enough room then to, let me see if I can get this open here. Alright, gives me enough room to accommodate the cap from the Challenger. What I've done here is a couple of things. I've cut this lower rim down as far as I can possibly do it, so it still retains this little plastic ring here that holds the whole mess together. You see there's little plastic clips here that this whole thing snaps into, and I've shaved the top where you have your thumb grip. It normally has a hole drilled in the center. The reason I'm retaining this is because information tells me that this is an emergency vent right here at the top, and if I was to use the existing seal from the way this was manufactured back in 1968, it would completely seal up the top of this fill tube. That it would be if I used the top of a regular 68. This one doesn't have the same flat surface as the top of a 68. This one has the configuration to accommodate this twist cap to go in. At any rate, it's not advisable to get rid of this little vent here. This is in case pressure builds up in your gas tank. It's an emergency kind of pressure relief valve, and it blows off whatever pressure through here. Sealing it up, you risk blowing out the gas tank. At least that's what I've been told, and so I'm not willing to risk that, and so this fits down in through here, and with this shaved off just enough that this closes down nicely on top of it. You're still able to tighten this down onto the top of this filler. Now I've cut the filler right now a lot longer than it's going to end up being, but I want this to be as long as possible so that when you put the gas nozzle in, it doesn't hit where I'm going to splice this together. I had an issue with my car, and I had to put a little thin sheet metal tube in there in order to cover the transition, and so that when I fill it up with gas, the nozzle goes down and it doesn't have a problem. Even with that, this is going to be a pretty severe bend, and the gas pumps these days, there's a lot of them that don't like that. So I've had the situation of stopping at a gas station, and it would not pump the gas in. It would just keep shutting up. The automatic shutoff would just keep engaging with my car. For the most part, about 75% of the time, I don't have an issue, but still, there's not going to be really a whole lot of a way to avoid having a sharper bend here, because of the fact that this is way lower than this fill tube was actually designed. The fill tube, if you were to have it in this position where it was on the Challenger, would be almost above this quarter panel, so that it gets out up over top of the tire and then down as it crosses over way up in the top here. I don't know if you can see that or not, it's probably too dark, but then it comes down back behind where the shock absorber is, this fill tube, then it goes back down and into the gas tank that's underneath the seat. Well, this is way too low to have that cross over this area here and then run down the way it was designed initially. At least that's the way it's always looked to me. I've done a number of mock-ups of these, and it never seems to work out right. So what I'm going to have to do is something that I did with my own car, and that's come down here, swing around with a tube, making sure that it goes downhill, and then I'm going to have to cut a hole right just in front of the shock absorber mounts over here, and then I'm going to have to twist the hole so that it becomes oblique, so that I'll be able to run a piece of silicone tubing through there and then join it up with the inner piece still behind the wheel. Like I said, there's not enough room to make the bend and go up over this piece here, this wheel tub. So with that in mind, I'll have to have the tube running on the inside of the trunk, which is not my favorite thing to do, but you know, you have to make a compromise somewhere, and that's the way I made it on my car. The mistake I did make on my car, I must say, was when I first did it, I did it all with silicone tubing. In other words, I just had this abbreviated piece here, and then I went all the way around with the silicone tube. Well, even though silicone tube is is not affected by gasoline, what happened was there was a slack in the tube, and when you put gas in the car, the gas would lay in that slack in the tube. It wouldn't follow all the way down and into the tank, and it caused the entire trunk area to smell like gasoline. So I ended up having to make a rigid steel 1-inch tube and make sure all the way to that point there, with the car sitting at rake, that it was going downhill to that point, so that all the gas drained out of that tube and didn't sit in the tube inside the trunk. Anyway, a lot to be considered here. Okay, so the first thing I've got to do is I have this lip on this filler neck, and I want to come up underneath of it with a rim, so I have something to mount it to the underside of the quarter panel, and I have to make it in 2 halves, because obviously I can't slip it past this vent tube that's welded into the side here. So the first thing I got to do, though, after determining a bunch of things, mocking it up, I need this rim to be slightly proud of the hole that's already in the quarter panel, so that the rubber gasket engages this first before the bottom edge of the cap bottoms out on the top side. Anyway, so if I put a flange right up underneath here, obviously it's just going to be flush because of the thickness of the sheet metal. So I just want it to be just a tick proud. So I have to come up with a little rise in the plate first. And what I did was just make a this is a little little press form here, a couple of 3/16 inch plates. It's not the best. It's a little too flexible, but for what I have to do right now, that's good enough. Real quick, just cut it out with a hole saw, weld the inner circle to the bottom plate. And there's enough space because of the hole saw's kerf and the saw tooth. A couple of bolts just welded through, drilled and welded on the back side of the under plate here, or the top plate I should say.
And the whole thing goes into press like this after you sandwich a piece of sheet metal in and center it up in the centering pin right here. So anyway, this one here is one I made first, and it's too small, so I made this one a little bit larger so that I have enough to actually make the difference of standing this up just a tick like that. So it's just proud of the surface of the external sheet metal. Anyway, I'm going to do that next. Okay, so here's the flange welded on. The two halves are welded up. As you can see, it's got a little upstand to it. Made sure to keep my tacks well on the outside of this inner rim because I want to make sure that I don't put any rough spots in it in any way, because that's where the rubber seal goes. So now I've got to come up with a hole pattern to put in here to mount it up underneath the quarter panel. I've already taken and put some studs into the quarter panel. And the way I did that was I drilled some countersink holes, and once I got the countersink holes in, I put some 1024 countersink screws in and got them flushed up, and then welded them up pretty good, and then ground them off. And the reason I did that is instead of just a through bolt with a countersink, they have to be countersunk in order to allow for the ring to go on and flushed up. But sheet metal, there's hardly any sheet metal there to grab the countersink for a through bolt situation. So in order to make sure that it's secure, I went ahead and welded them up as studs. Then I got underneath there and I pressed this pattern into the studs, and so that this, now I can push this up inside here and I can mark where my hole is, and then I can get my orientation on my other piece as to how all this goes together. Okay, with the pattern just pushed up on those studs, it's held up by just the friction of the threads that are on those studs. I'll now trace out this hole and mark out these other drill holes. But I have to be careful because in stacking the ring and then this upper ring on, I found that this hardware is kind of offset from this hole, and it's shoved in the wrong direction from where I need it to go. In other words, I have a pillar here that you see I've already ground some off of it. It's very, very close here. So I want this cap to be as to the right of where this is. And if I mount it straight through, like if I center the tube in this hole right now and put this all together, this cap will be so far up against this post over here, even with it ground off, that you won't be able to, without a lot of effort, try and open it up. So I've got to figure out a way to, get this thing biased to one side, or excuse me, I have the option now of this has got to go through those existing holes in the quarter panel. I have to get the neck itself biased in this direction over here in order to get the neck as far over to the right side of this as possible, in order for this to be able to clear this tower sufficiently so that this is easily operated. Anyway, I hope that was clear. Alright, now that I've got my pattern, I marked my put this up underneath the quarter panel and kind of oriented the way I wanted this tube to be running in the car, so that I have this lined up over here with this hole over here, and that basically gives me the orientation of the direction I've got to go. Now I want to shove this pattern as much as I can in this direction here, which means I'm going to have to dog out the hole on the car maybe 1/8 of an inch in this direction, and also on the inside of this rim towards this hole right here. I have to take out some of this material here in order to shove this whole thing that way, in order to bring the neck, see right now it fits pretty tightly on there, and I want that thing to move over to where I've got a little bit of a bias in this direction over here in order to give me that clearance on that side. So I have to be very careful how I approach this and make sure that I've got everything set where it's supposed to be. Okay, so I've dogged this ring out here as close as I can get to the mounting screw, and I transferred that onto this pattern of the hole, and I dogged it out. I had to do a little bit of grinding along here
You know, remember I had this panel that is depressed and it's got a little bit of a mound. Well, I had to kind of grind some of that mound off just in order to get this over as much as possible. You can see that this side over here now is gapped a little bit, which is what I was looking for, and this is a whole lot closer. So this whole piece here would be shoved away, biased in this direction. Now hopefully that'll be enough once I get my holes drilled to get it away from this pillar over here. It was in the opposite direction. It was biased like this when I started out, so hopefully by making this little adjustment here, I'll have gained that 1/8 of an inch I need of clearance. Alright, so you can see I've got this thing so that it's biased towards this point over here, which correlates with the snap on the cap. So it's as far to that direction as I could get it. And I just went ahead and drilled out the mounting holes for the ring and then also the cap mechanism. And I'll be putting some capture nuts on the back side of that ring that surrounds this filler neck, and that way we have to be screwing down through here to attach that ring, as opposed to having to nut and bolt it. As this one here, I had to put the nuts on the back side, but at least they were studs held in place, so there wasn't a screwdriver and a ratchet going at the same time. Okay, I just wanted to show you that I welded some captured or some T-nuts, threaded T-nuts on the back side here. They're 1032s. They don't have to be T-nuts, they can be just a regular nut. But I just happen to have a bunch of these left over from when I used to work in big time racing, and so using them up. Anyway, now I'm going to put the whole mess together and see if she works. Okay, so that seemed to work out okay. There's just enough, after I cut out all of the guts out of here, and I just left this rim here. The way I've got this trimmed off is just enough that I have to push down just a little bit so for it to clip. So it puts tension on this clip here. That's a happy accident. I thought I was going to have to, work a lot on the top side here to kind of pack it out or put a rubber cushion in there so that it would create the tension, because without that tension this thing wants to rattle around pretty good. Normally it has a spring in there, and the spring compresses and keeps this whole thing stable. Anyway, so that worked out okay, and you can see that I'm right up against it, even though you can see how biased it is over here. I probably had just a tick more room to play with, but this seems to work okay. It's not binding up, and I'm not having a problem getting it in there. The bottom edge of the gas cap is not riding on that chrome rim. As you can see, that part of it's free, so that's good. So that means the rubber is engaging the neck first, not the plastic on the bottom of this rim here. Anyway, one of the things I wanted to show you is one of the things that's annoying about working with countersinks, if you're trying to make something fit in a precise location, sometimes what happens, if you got a cheap countersink screw, the cone on the bottom side is asymmetrical. What that means is that it's not meant to be a precise fit with anything. So when you put your countersink in the hole and then you put the screw down in there, the screw sometimes will have a camming action, and once it starts to tighten down into the cone, it'll shift the piece left or right depending on how bad the screw is as far as the cone on the bottom side of the screw. So that could be an annoying thing when you're trying to do a precision fit here and you don't want it to shift 1/8 of an inch one way or another. So anyway, that's that. Now I have to see what kind of fuel line I can make up to go back to connect up with the rest of the fuel line in the car. Incidentally, I just want to thank Clint Turner, who we got in a conversation back and forth about using this. I was almost about ready to give up trying to use this,
and through a number of conversations we had back and forth over a number of weeks, we kind of brainstormed and figured out how to make this all work with this old style gas cap, and I'm pretty happy about that. So yeah, thanks Clint. He's out in British Columbia and he's putting a one of these on a Hellcat chassis. Anyway, thanks again. Alright, so I've gone ahead and I've drilled a hole about 1.5 inches. I've got a 1-inch tube that's got to pass through there, but this is where I will use a little bit of silicone hose to join this piece of fuel tube coming up from the tank up to this point, and to get this transition over here, I'll use this silicone tube here and connect it to my steel tube on the inside. What I've done here, though, as you can see, is the hole is directionalized, and how I did that was I first drilled with a hole saw and just cut it straight in with an 1.5 inch hole. And I got a piece of 1.25 inch pipe and I stuck it in the hole, straight in the hole, and then I just twisted it in this direction as hard as I could. And this way it allows the tube to not be kinked and going around the corner to the inside here, so it'll sweep around a little bit easier with the hole directionalized in this direction over here. Anyway, that's just a little trick of torquing that sheet metal, and it's right in front of all the strong stuff, which is right here. All the supports for your shock tower right here. This is all some pretty hefty stuff here. It's just above this pinch weld over here. That's going to give me enough slope up to the gas filler to make sure that the gas goes downhill and into the tank. Alright, so you can see the silicone hose. This is the bare minimum. It's about 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches right here from this flange that ties it to the car, and it makes this turn as tight as it can go right here into the car. Over here you can see it comes through, hugs the wall of the wheel tub. I've got a bracket over here that's just a conduit bracket that's usually used for standing conduit off a wall. It just bolts through the center, and then there's a bolt that you can tighten up around it so you can, sneak up on how tight you make that hose. And then from there it goes at a pretty straight angle across the wheel tub here, uphill. I've salvaged this curve from the filler neck, so it's the same diameter as this and this. I cut this about 2 inches from the top here where it tapers down. Hopefully that'll put the transition down lower and won't interrupt the gas fill. Anyway, so it's pretty simple from there. Just a curve straight into that hose, and the hose takes up the flexibility of going around the turn and through the wheel tub and then down into the fill tube on the inside of the wheel tub. So, and then the other thing I have to do is I have to take this breather tube, and I have to run some hose over and get it also through that firewall there. Anyway, I got to take it all out of here now and weld it all up. Alright, now that this is in permanently, I went ahead and sealed it right around the neck here. There's 3 holes obviously to mount that top ring, so when I put those screws, I'll put a little sealant around the screws before I drive them in, and that'll hopefully keep your water out of there. Over here I've got it all hooked up permanently now, painted it out with self-etching primer and then with some trim black. Here you can see I've taken a 1/4 inch inside diameter fuel hose, and it's actually a fuel injector hose, which is a little pricey, but believe it or not, 3 different stores, they didn't have any 1/4 inch regular fuel line. But anyways, I use this to slide over this. Fits perfectly. And then you can see I've got a hole drilled in that area that used to be the upstand in the wheel hole that allowed the room for the original fuel neck. So there's a nice vertical panel just to drill through there, and I put a rubber grommet in there to send it into the area of the wheel tub to connect up over here. And normally this metal part of the breather is attached to the fuel line, which is up this way, so it's usually welded to this piece here. But now that this is abbreviated, I just welded a tab onto this so that I could screw it directly to the inner wheel tub, and then the connection's made up above the shock tower, and then of course it goes along and then connects through that grommet. Anyway, what remains is to just to tie it into the tank, which is lined up with that down there. So anyways, that's where we are with that, and on to the next thing. Alright, the last thing I did was to run a bead of silicone around where the silicone hose goes through that oblong hole that I put in to the side of the wheel tub, so this to seal it up from the inside of the car. Anyway, that's going to be it for this week. It's a little bit of a short week. I'm heading to Carlisle and in a couple of days, so I'll see you on the next one.